All right, guys. So, as you know, the Fantastic Four is coming up. So, Marvel's president Kevin Feige held a press conference where he basically laid it all out there. There's been a lot of speculation about the current state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel Studios as a whole. Obviously, the multiverse saga that's been taking place over the past few phases has had a lot of ups and downs. We had a content boom with the launch of Disney Plus back in 2020, and a lot of different series and characters were getting highlighted, but we suddenly went from having, 1 to 2 Marvel things to see a year to suddenly every single month of the year there was new Marvel content coming out. So we went through a very big transition, followed by a pandemic, which delayed movies and impacted timelines, followed by, critical and fan hits and misses and mixed receptions, and then a big strike, a writers and actors strike that impacted a lot of the work. So there's been a lot happening in the Marvel realm. On top of that, we had a merger go through with 20th Century, which gave the X-Men back to Marvel. There's so many different things in the past few years. And now, ahead of Fantastic Four, Kevin Feige basically brought the press out and was like, yo, let me just give it to you all. Let me give it to you all straight, and let's talk through what's been going on. So I got some highlights here I wanted to walk through with y'all. So loved the way that Boris Kitt and the Hollywood Reporter laid this out. Yes, Feige knows Marvel made too many movies and shows. Now, what I really appreciate about Kevin Feige acknowledging this is that it kind of confirms what has been everybody's assumption, kind of like the shared understanding, that then CEO of Walt Disney, Bob Chapek, basically said, flood the market on Disney Plus content. And it's very interesting to see it laid out like this. From the first Iron Man through Endgame, there was about 50 hours of on-screen storytelling. In the 6 years since Endgame, the number has jumped to 102 hours. 127 if you include animation. So in the 10-11 years between the launch of the MCU and the Endgame, 50 hours in 11 years, and now in 6 years, 100 hours. We have literally doubled the output of content that has existed for Marvel, and it's too much. 100%. Feige knows it, the studio knows it, the audience knows it. And I know whether you're a fan of the MCU or you're somebody who maybe used to be a fan of the Marvel movies, or if you've ever talked to anybody who's curious about becoming a fan of the Marvel movies, the biggest hesitation most folks have is, oh, there's just so much. I just don't want to commit to watching all of it. Which, as a fan of comics and as somebody who's kind of grown up in this medium, it's so disappointing to hear because, that's so not the point. The point is that you can't just pick up any book and run with it. You can pick a character, pick a story arc, and just be like, yeah, sure, I'll take it. And there's so much just acceptance that goes along with, okay, yeah, there's some things I don't know about, and if I want to know, I can go and find out. But it's a little bit different when you're coming off of Endgame, one of the biggest movies of all time, being the culmination of doing all that work, of going 11 years and actually doing all the work and watching all the movies. And so, Kevin Feige confirms it was a big company push and it doesn't take too much to push us. This was a very wholesome thing. He's like, we've been wanting to do Miss Marvels. Do it. Oscar Isaac wants to be Moon Knight. Do it. Of course they were excited. Of course they had the check cleared and they said, make more things. Let's do it. But it was a mandate. It was a mandate and they were having fun with it. But it very clearly became quantity over quality, which I think maybe Marvel, coming off the heels of having to do so much work to prove themselves worthy to have a seat at the table, maybe they just got a little bit ahead of themselves there. And so I'm just going to quote Feige here directly. So it's that expansion that I think led people to say, do I have to see all of these? It used to be fun, but now do I have to know everything about all of these? And I think the Marvels hit it hardest, where people are like, okay, I recognize her from a $1 billion movie, but who are those other two? I guess they were in some TV show. I'll skip it. And ultimately, that's one of the parts about the Disney Plus expansion that I think really hurt the franchise. And I think that that's something, frankly, that Marvel could be doing better in their marketing efforts, and Disney could be doing better in their marketing efforts. And it's something that, you know, maybe with the Marvels it's a little bit more difficult because it did coincide, the release coincided with the writers and actors strike, so they weren't able to do press about it. But this would be the type of thing that, you know, if you had formats like late shows still existing, RIP. No, but, you know, with social media campaigns, with interviews and podcasts and stuff like that, you can have the stars, you can have the directors kind of championing that message to folks of like, hey, you don't have to do the homework. You can be a brand new fan and walk into this movie and still enjoy yourself. Is there going to be some payoff for the folks that did all the work? Absolutely, but it's not something you had to do. And Marvel understands this to be the case too. They talk about it with Thunderbolts, which famously underperformed at the box office. If you actually saw the movie, it wouldn't be the case that you had to do all the homework. But we have to make sure the audience understands that. And, you know, it's something that I think it's very funny. You know, I like to mention my mom being, your mom, anybody's mom. Moms are the ideal when you're picturing like the general audience. Just picture, how would you talk to your mom about it? How would you explain it to your mom? My mom is a little bit of a completionist, and she does love the Marvel movies. So every time a new one comes out, she always texts me. She's like, which ones do I need to watch? I'm like, well, technically this movie, that movie, this movie, and the entirety of this TV show. And it's like, whoa, that's a lot to go through. It's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So you don't actually have to do that. But for some folks, they kind of feel like that's what it is. And likely it's because Infinity War and Endgame were such a reward. They were such a reward for doing all the work and watching all of these movies that maybe that's just become the expectation, that going into these next big films, whether they be small crossover events or even sequels that just highlight a bunch of characters, the expectation is, oh, this is a culmination of all this work, but I didn't do this work because there's so much content that exists already. On top of that, Feige did address the Jonathan Majors of it all. So for those of you who maybe don't know, Jonathan Majors was playing Kang in the MCU. Kang was being set up to be essentially the next Thanos, but on top of some poor critical reception and then a very bad personal scandal that Jonathan Majors went through regarding assault charges against his partner at the time, he was essentially fired from his role, and Marvel decided to fully pivot. What was originally Avengers Kang Dynasty became Avengers Doomsday. So there's been a lot of pivoting that had to take place, and a lot of folks speculated, very understandably so, that had to do with Jonathan Majors, personal affairs and him ultimately being let go. Feige actually pushes back against that claim here, and I find it interesting that this is coming out now, and I'm kind of of two minds about it. Either they didn't want it to come out sooner because they didn't want to make it sound like they were making excuses, or this is kind of a bit of backpedaling. So let's hear what the president of Marvel Studios had to say. We had started even before what had happened to the actor happened, keeping it vague. We had started to realize that Kang wasn't big enough, wasn't Thanos. So we had started talking about Doctor Doom even before we officially pivoted from Kang. And in fact, I had started talking with Robert about his audacious idea before Ant-Man 3 even came out. So the claim here is that the Doctor Doom pivot and the idea that maybe Kang wasn't the right direction was happening even before Ant-Man 3 released. There is a small part of me that does buy this and does believe this, and that does come from the fact that the movie had some extensive reshoots, and it ends, Ant-Man 3, Ant-Man Quantumania, it ends with Ant-Man defeating Kang. And though it is implied that there is a big council of Kangs and that they're interested in coming, and though Loki Season 2 does tie a lot of weight to Kang's story, there is a lot of room in there for them to say, actually, we kind of gave up on this idea sooner. That does not mean, though, that there is not still some work to do to kind of engage this retcon, which ultimately is going to have to fall on Avengers Doomsday to do, because all the content we have so far still does point to some sort of multiversal threat, but the only multiversal threat we know of still is Kang. So Doctor Doom has not been introduced yet. I imagine Fantastic Four, when it comes out this weekend, will have something to say about that. Moving on to the Spider-Man of it all, we can expect Miles Morales to stay in the realm of animation for quite some time. When asked about Miles Morales, Sony has their brilliant, genius, incredible Spider-Verse animated franchise going, and until that finishes, we've been told to stay away. So, Brand New Day comes out, Spider-Man 4, Spider-Man Brand New Day comes out, I believe next year, if not the following year. We have 2 years until the conclusion of the Spider-Verse trilogy. Whether or not they continue to do more Spider-Verse movies, we don't know for sure, but we can imagine that at least for the next maybe 4 years, not to expect to see Miles Morales on screen. Ultimately, I'm fine with this. I would love to see Tom Holland's Peter Parker get another trilogy as a young adult. We kind of had the high school trilogy. Would love to see the young adult trilogy and then introducing a Miles Morales. And then, hey, we can even do the traditional handoff that happens with Miles Morales' story. As sad as it is to imagine. The Blade movie is happening. Feige does make a joke about selling the costumes for Sinners. But he did confirm they're still working it out. There have been 4 takes on Blade over the years. 2 were periods, 2 were not. Marvel has now landed on a modern day Blade story, and Mahershala Ali is still attached. Let me just add, I saw Jurassic World. It was fine. Man, Mahershala Ali is great. He really needs his own movie to run, and I cannot wait for them to finally get this Blade movie up and going, because it's been like 6 years since he was announced as Blade, and we still don't have a movie, which is so disappointing. He did also confirm that there is a timeline for Black Panther 3. Alright. Couple other standout things from this press conference. 1, Stephen McFeely is writing Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret War. Feige also confirmed that the Loki creator Michael Waldron is helping on the screen, on the writing. Some folks are going to have a big reaction to this. Michael Waldron also worked on Multiverse of Madness. Michael Waldron worked on the Loki series. He also worked on Quantumania. Some folks are skeptical about his abilities. I think that Michael Waldron is a completely fine screenwriter, and there is so much wibbly wobbly multiversal stuff, and there were a lot of threads that were laid out that ultimately would be disappointing were they not followed through. So Stephen McFeely's been out of the Marvel game for a little bit. He needs a hand. Let's let him get some help. And then jumping over to Deadline, where we have some more of the work here. There is a long-term plan that post Secret Wars, there will be a reset. Now, this is something a lot of us have expected, but haven't had an official confirmation, in that after Avengers Secret Wars, the MCU will be essentially soft rebooted and reset into a singular timeline. And the first time we will see that happen is with the X-Men. Now, I do think this is getting pulled out of context in a lot of areas, and there is also some context that is important to attribute here. So, what Kevin Feige is saying is that there will be a reboot of sorts in the MCU post Secret Wars. I think he is definitively talking about the X-Men. He has confirmed that Jake Schreier from the Thunderbolts is directing an X-Men movie, and he has confirmed that in that interpretation of the X-Men, we will see characters recast. Characters that exist in the Fox, the 20th century X-Men franchise, are going to be recast for the new reset timeline MCU. This is important to say because movies like the Deadpool franchise becoming MCU canon, Deadpool and Wolverine, and now what we know about the cast from Avengers Doomsday, the old Fox X-Men cast is becoming canonized in a way, so it's important to make the distinction that they will be reset. However, Feige does also go on to mention that it is likely that other lead characters will be recast as well. And I know that a lot of folks have had a lot of feelings about this because the implication here is that characters like Iron Man and Captain America will eventually be recast. This is ultimately the right decision, and I think that this is going to be my hot take for the day. We have to be okay with the fact that the actors who portray these characters will not be the only actors who portray these characters. Whether it be multiversal stuff, whether it be time travel stuff, whether it be just they want to bring this character back and the actor who originally portrayed them was not available, I don't think it's a terrible thing to want to continue the story and want to continue that character's development outside of the original actor. I think it is a discredit to the actors who originally portrayed them to say that they have to be absolutely stuck and absolutely glued to these characters. And I think it's a discredit to the storytelling that could happen by still leveraging some of these characters and some of their stories. We see James Bond recast all the time. We see Superman and Batman recast all the time. And yes, I know we have only seen Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, and to imagine somebody else doing that character is a little bit bizarre. But ultimately, if we don't do it, we are dooming, pun intended, we are dooming Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark as the only live-action interpretation of that character that we'll see. And I don't think that that's fair. I think there's a lot of really cool Tony Stark stories that are left to be told that I would like to see, that I would like future generations and future fans of the MCU to see. And so ultimately, if we do need to recast some of these folks, I think that's fine. And I think it'd be fine to do it in other cases as well. You know, there have been actors who have had things happen to them, like Kevin Feige said, that have caused entire shifts to happen. There have been actors who become ill or pass away, and suddenly their characters need to be retired. There's a lot of different things that... There's this idea that sometimes a character is specifically tied to that actor, and I do think that in the case of Marvel and specifically comic book movie storytelling, we need to be okay with the idea that the character can be bigger than the actor. And I know this is a hot take, and I fully understand if you want to disagree with me. You're completely valid in that, but I think I'm going to stand on that. I'm excited to see somebody else give a stab at Steve Rogers and give a stab at Tony Stark and any of these other characters, because I also know that that does not take away the version that I love. If another actor plays Steve Rogers, it does not take away from Chris Evans' portrayal. right? Because two things can be true at the same time. But folks, if you stopped by, thanks so much. If you watch this on YouTube later, thanks so much. I hope you have an awesome rest of your week, and I'll see y'all next time, all right? Take it easy. See you later.